And let's start with the next concept and the next lesson, that is the AWS Well-Architected Framework. Here we will try to understand first of all the basic definition of architecture. Then we'll define what a well-formed architecture is. And then we'll look at the 6 pillars of AWS well-formed architecture. So what exactly is an architecture? So architecture is an art and science of designing and building large structures. The important thing here to understand it is an art as well as a science, right? So we'll try to understand this in detail once we look at the 6 pillars of architecture. But keep in mind that this is a science, but it is also an art as well. The next thing is, the large system requires architects to manage their size and complexity. Similarly, if we talk about the cloud, we need cloud architects who actually understand what the business is, who understand what the requirements are, and then they can manage the size and complexity of that particular project. Now let's talk about the cloud architects. So who are the cloud architects? So they are the one who engage with decision maker to identify the business goal and capabilities that need improvement. So basically they translate the business terminology into a solution which can be deployed on the cloud. So they also ensure the alignment between the deliverables. What are we trying to deliver? What are we trying to create? And also the business goals. So that means they are like intermediaries between what we actually create in the cloud and what are the business and the business goals. So they work with the delivery teams that implement solution to ensure that technology features are appropriate, because they are the one who has that kind of a clear and the big picture in mind, so that they can guide and understand. So they always talk to our delivery teams. So having a well-architected system greatly increases the likelihood of business success. That is why we need architects, so that we can deliver something which will create value to the business, which will create likelihood of the business success. Now, what is a well-architected framework? So it is a guide. It literally is a guide, so with a lot of questions in that. So it is a guide that is designed to help you build the most secure, high-performing, resilient, and efficient infrastructures. It will guide you to ask those specific questions, get those specific answers, so that you can define your infrastructure, you can define your application in such a way that it will actually help you succeed. So it provides a set of foundational questions, as I was saying, and the best practices that can help you evaluate and implement your cloud architects. And now, so the cloud providers, how do they develop this architecture? So they interview and review a lot of the customers and the customer architects, and then they see, how they have designed it, and that is how they came up with this, the guide or the framework, which can help anyone out there to define their system or design their system. So what are the 6 pillars of the AWS here? The 6 pillars are operational excellence pillar, your security, reliability, performance efficiency, cost optimization, and sustainability. So these are the 6 pillars. Let's look at each pillar one by one and try to understand what it is and what kind of, the questions which are there, which an architect needs to answer or needs to get an answer for. The first one is operational excellence. So as the name indicates, we talk about operations. So when we have deployed our resources in cloud, so then the operations comes into picture. So operations is a pretty big team which actually manages your entire infrastructure, right? So that's an operations team. So we have the concept of site reliability engineering, SRE. So that is also based on the operations and also the software. So the operation excellence pillar talks about the ability to support the development and run workloads effectively and gain insight into the operations and continuous improvement. So they also look for continuous improvement. So once we have something in the cloud already, so we'll try to improve that also. And in the end, what is required is like we deliver value to the business. So what are the key questions that we try to answer here? How do you determine the priorities? What the priorities are? So when we talk about operations, so in the development phase also, we prioritize, what is the demand of the business? That is how we develop that and we push to cloud. So how do you reduce the defects? That is once you are there in the cloud, and before that also, how do you reduce the defect? You erase remediation and improve the flow of production. So how you can quickly create error-free solutions and deploy that in production. So how do you manage your workload and operational events? How the workloads are being managed? If there's a workload which demands more resources, more capacity, how do you obtain that capacity? That is what the operational excellence pillars talk about. How do you evolve the operation? That is also important. How do you evolve your operations? The automation is one of the key things which actually the operation rely on. So that is the quick evolution. Every time you automate, you deliver. So that is the success factor here in the operation excellence. The next one is the security pillar. The security talks about, the protection of your data and your systems, and again, you take advantage of the cloud technology, which improves your security further. So what are the key questions here? How do you securely operate your workload? How do you manage your permissions to the people and the machines? And how do you detect and investigate security events? Very important, incident response, which we studied in the last session. So that is where it is, how do you detect and investigate events? How do you protect your data at rest and in transit? Everything is being talked about in the security pillar. So we need to answer all these questions. We need to answer so that we can come up with an architecture which will actually follow all the principles. So we don't miss anything out there. So how do you anticipate, respond, and recover from incident? This is also, again, talks about the incident response. Once the incident has happened, then what we do? We talked about the root cause analysis, and we talked about, once we understand, we'll try to ensure that the incident never happens again. Next is the reliability pillar. So what is the reliability here? So the reliability is, the ability to function, anything to function what it is intending to perform. So similarly, the reliability pillar here means the ability of the workload to perform its intended function correctly and consistently when it is expected to. So this includes the ability to operate and test the workload through its total life cycle. How do we ensure that whatever we deliver, whatever we create is reliable? We have to ensure that testing should be there. Once we create the solution, testing should be there throughout the life cycle of the solution which we deliver. So what are the key questions of the reliability here? How do you manage service quotas? How do you manage constraints? How do you design an interaction in a distributed system environment to prevent failures? So preventing failures also means reliable, right? So if we prevent failures, we ensure that your system is reliable. Then how do you design your workload to adapt changes in demand? There is a change in capacity, there is a change in demand, or there is try to improvise something. You have to ensure that whatever incremental changes you are pushing to production, you're pushing to your software, you're pushing to your solution, they are reliable. They should not break the system. They should not break the function which is there. So next thing is your performance efficiency. The performance efficiency pillar includes the ability to use the computing resources efficiently. That is what a performance is, right? So if you don't use your resources judiciously, or we don't optimize use the resources, then what is going to happen is your performance is going to degrade. For example, if you consume too much of your CPU when it was not required, then what is going to happen is it will hamper your workloads, right? To maintain the efficiency of the demand and changes technology evolve. What are the key questions there? The key questions there are, how do you select the best performing architecture? So if you see performance, it starts with the design. That is a key thing here to understand. So the performance always starts, just like security starts in the beginning, performance also starts in the beginning. So we need to understand what kind of architecture. If your architecture is not the best solution, that it will never perform out there. Next thing, how, to select the compute solution. If you know that your workload is memory intensive, you go for compute solution, or you go for an instance type, which is a memory intensive instance. This is how you choose. Then what is your storage solution? Do you rely on your solid state device? Do you rely on your magnetic solution, or what kind of storage tier which you want to use? Then how do you select your database solution? Whether you want to go with a full-fledged, on an EC2 instance, you install your database, or what you can do is you can go for relational database service or a managed solution, right? So that's another question. So how do you configure your network? That is also important. How do you configure your network so that, you get the best performance out of your solution? The next thing is the cost optimization pillar. Again, it is a very key pillar because, if we don't optimize, we'll burn out our resources pretty fast, especially, the money which the business is putting in, they will burn out very fast. So the idea of the cost optimization is we want to operate in cloud with the lowest price point. That is how you get the maximum bang on the buck, right? So what are the key questions here? How do you implement cloud financial management? We need to have some kind of control. So that's why it is called the cloud financial management here. Now the next thing is, how do you control? We control when we monitor. So right, that's the key. So if we don't measure, we cannot control. So we monitor the user and cost. Then we decommission the resources which we don't need. Why we need to pay for that resources? So we decommission that. We actually stop those services and we don't never use them. How do you manage demand and supply resources? That is also important. How are we going to manage the demand? So whether we want to scale our resources automatically when they are required, or we pre-provision some of the resources, right? So that is also another thing which optimizes your cost. So how do you evaluate the new services? If there is a new service which has come in, how do you evaluate that so that you don't burn yourself, you don't burn and then you maintain profitability? So next thing is your sustainability pillar. The sustainability pillar focuses on the environmental impact. It also talks about your energy efficiency and energy consumption. As I said, all the cloud providers actually try to go green, and then the important thing is, they will try to sustain. They will try to ensure that their resources, whatever we use, they actually consume less energy, so that it's a sustainable energy source for them. Is a key questions here. How do you select a region for your workload? Where you want to put your workload? So one thing is compliance. Another thing is you want to put the workload where it can sustain. The next thing is how do you align your cloud resources to your demand? That is also another key question which we answer. How do you take the advantage of the data management policy and pattern to support your sustainability goals, right? So those are some of the questions which we try to answer. So we looked at all the security pillars, and this is the end of the session. The idea here is that the architecture, as we said, it is art as science. Science, we know that we are trying to build an architecture. It is a science. Now the art, let me try to answer why it is an art. The art is asking those relevant questions. Even though you are given with this guide, which is a framework given to you by the cloud provider, but still it is an art to get the best questions answered. So the idea is the business. So the business people, so they will go with a very big picture. They will say, okay, I want the best solution, which is, let's say, 100% available. They'll talk about the big things. But when you sit down as an architect with them, you try to engage them with a conversation like, how much it is going to cost you, and then you can bring your things down. So that is why it is an art. An architect has to be an artist in a sense to ask relevant questions, so that that the management also understands what we are heading to, how much cost it is. Otherwise they will always look for the best architecture, but the thing is they will not be ready to pay that much. So now we understand what is the well-formed architecture. We also looked at the 6 pillars of best form architecture. We talked about operational excellence, how your operation works, and the key thing here is automation, and we also try to improve our operations. Then we talked about security. We talked about security, bringing the cloud provider brings in new features. We also talked about in the security, how we secure our data in transit, your security at rest, and the other dimension about the network security. The performance efficiency is also important. The performance here means, your workload should be performant enough so that they don't consume all the resources. Right? We have to ensure that it is performance, it is optimized to use the resources. Then the reliability pillar. We understood that, our solution should be reliable. It should perform what it is intending to do. Then the cost optimization thing. Again, we have to optimize the cost. We should not over provision. And that is the first thing, which you optimize your cost. And then we have to design for capacity, for, let's say, increasing capacity in our mind. Then we have to decommission what is not required. The last one is the sustainability. So sustainability, actually, if you try to see, try to study more about it, the sustainability not only talks about the environment sustainability, it is also the business sustainability also. Like if you see some of the questions we started, like it's not only about the sustainability of the environment, it is how your business is also going to sustain. That is what the sustainability is.